The next item is uh, Cam, your presentation on the master plan.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thanks for being willing to schedule this special meeting tonight regarding a really important topic, the Palomar master plan. The staff has put together a presentation for you. Will be available at the end of it to answer any questions that you might have. But before we get underway, I do want to recognize the team that we have here tonight. So first of all, we have Leanne Carmichael. She leads the Environmental Services Unit for the County of San Diego, and with her is Sandy Hazelwood and Jeff Kishak. We also have Ann Baldwin, who heads up our real estate section, but has been really working with us on the master plan, and she's actually taking care of the presentation of flipping the slides for us tonight. And then, of course, we have Laura and Elena and Olivier from Palomar. I think I got everybody right. Did I miss anybody from the team? No.
Nope. That's it.
Good. So I'm going to turn the first part of the presentation over to Olivier, and then we'll both Leanne and I will have speaking roles through it through the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Olivier.
Thank you, Cam. Tonight, we will provide a brief background and update on the Palomar Airport Master Plan, which is scheduled to return to the board November 3rd. The Department of Public Works manages 8 airports located throughout the county. 6 of these are in unincorporated areas, while 2 are located within incorporated cities. All these airports are operated, maintained, and improved at no cost to the taxpayer. Expenses are entirely covered by user fees and property leases. Tonight, we are focusing on Palomar Airport, which is located within the city of Carlsbad. Palomar was constructed on county-owned property when it opened in 1959. The surrounding area consisted mainly of agricultural uses. Over the last 60 years, light industrial, commercial, and recreational uses have developed around the airport. In 1978, the city of Carlsbad annexed the airport, citing economic benefits for the city and increased services to the county, and later issued a conditional use permit for its continued operation. Palomar is part of the National Air Transportation System and is certified by the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, for passenger service. Airlines traditionally offer daily regional service to Phoenix and Los Angeles, carrying up to 78,000 passengers annually, utilizing a 30-seat aircraft. Over time, airlines upgraded to new 50 and 70-seat aircraft that required a longer runway than what is currently available at Palomar, and daily service ended in 2015. Nevertheless, the demand in North County remains strong. A recent study determined that 14,000 total people per day are using air service that reside or are visiting a destination within 15 miles of Palomar. Today, the airport primarily serves as a business aviation hub for North County. For example, Qualcomm, which is headquartered in San Diego and employs over 11,000 people, has 2 aircraft at Palomar that traveled close to 500,000 miles in 2019. Palomar also provides facilities for a wide range of emergency services. Medical transport aircraft regularly use the airport to quickly transfer patients to hospitals and trauma centers. Helicopters operate from the airport in response to wildland fires, and law enforcement use the airport to support rescue, firefighting, and patrol calls. In total, the airport hosts over 140,000 flights per year and is home to over 300 based aircraft. All this activity generates jobs and economic benefits. Based on a recent analysis, Palomar currently supports 2,590 jobs, drives $461 million in economic activity, and generates $72 million in tax revenues in the region annually. Of the total impact, over 910 jobs, $165 million in economic activity, and $23 million in tax revenues occurred just within the city of Carlsbad. and wages in the air transportation sectors, the largest driven by on-airport activity, are $6,000 higher than the average in San Diego. I will now turn the presentation over to Cam Humphreys to discuss the safety enhancements.
Thanks, Olivier. Over the last 6 decades, since Palomar was built, much has changed. The primary tool that airports use to adapt to changes is the Airport Master Plan. An Airport Master Plan is a framework that guides development to enhance safety and accommodate aviation demand over a 20-year planning period. The FAA requires a rigorous process that includes a robust public outreach, a detailed investigation of facility requirements, a thorough evaluation of solutions to meet current and future needs, and an achievable implementation plan. Palomar's last master plan was completed in 1997 and was nearing the end of its planning period when the County Board of Supervisors directed its update. With public input, the primary objectives of the master plan were enhancing airport safety while remaining within the current property boundaries. Central to the master plan are the airport design standards, as they set the shape and the size of critical parts of the airport. For example, runway length is important to ensure aircraft have adequate room to take off and land. The distance between the runway and taxiway is important to ensure that aircraft can move around the airport safely. And safety areas are important to ensure there's enough clear space at the end of the runway to reduce risk of damage or injury if an aircraft overruns the runway. Design standards are categorized by an alphanumeric code based on the airport's critical aircraft. That's the fastest and largest aircraft that makes regular use of the airport. The letter is determined by the aircraft's approach speed, and the number is determined by its wingspan. The higher the letter and the number, the faster and the larger the aircraft. The critical aircraft in the previous airport master plan was a Falcon 2000 and is categorized as a B2. Now, with over 700 takeoffs and landings per year, Palomar's critical aircraft is the Gulfstream 500-600 series business jets and are categorized as a D3. However, the airport still only meets B2 design standards. Currently, 40% of the business jets based at Palomar exceed the B2 design standards. And while the county cannot control what types of aircraft use Palomar, as only the FAA has this authority, the county can improve safety for the aircraft currently using the airport. In consideration of the current airport configuration, the master plan evaluated B2 design standards with some safety enhancements. By way of orientation, this graphic shows Palomar looking west towards the ocean, and the property boundary is outlined in light blue. The runway is depicted in dark blue, the taxiways in yellow, and the north parking ramp in purple. At the far end, near the top of this graphic and depicted in red, is a system called EMAS. That system would be installed at the end of the runway and is designed to stop aircraft overrunning the runway, similar in concept to a runaway truck ramp. This alternative also includes options to extend the runway from 200 to 900 feet, shown here in light and dark green. With the high demand for air service in North County, the master plan recommended extending the runway in part to facilitate the return of regional service utilizing small 50 to 70 seat aircraft. Palomar has a single 4,897 foot runway, and within the contiguous United States, there are no airports with runways less than 5,000 feet with commercial air service. Extending the runway up to 900 feet is feasible. However, it requires bridging over an inactive landfill, as depicted here by a red dashed line, and constructing a retaining wall along Palomar Airport Road. Although this alternative enhances safety by adding EMAS and a potential runway extension, it does not meet the D3 design standards. Therefore, based on the evaluation criteria, it was not recommended by the master plan. In consideration of the airport's critical aircraft, the master plan evaluated D3 design standards. To provide the separation distances required for the D3 aircraft, the runway and taxiway would need to be relocated. And to accomplish this, the north parking ramp and associated taxiway would be removed, as shown here in purple and yellow. The runway and south taxiway would be shifted to the north, shown here in blue and yellow. The runway would also be extended from 370 to 800 feet, shown here in light and dark green. Lastly, the system to stop aircraft overruns would be installed on both ends of the runway. This option also requires bridging over an inactive landfill and a retaining wall along Palomar Airport Road. While these improvements are designed to accommodate the D3 aircraft currently using the airport, large commercial airliners such as the Boeing 737 will still not be able to operate at the airport due to the limitations of the runway, taxiway, parking ramp, and passenger terminal. Based on the critical aircraft currently using the airport, the master plan recommended this as the preferred development alternative. It is important to note these improvements do not expand Palomar. Rather, it would reconfigure components of the airport within the existing property boundaries. On October 10th, 2018, after an extensive 3-year planning effort, the board adopted the master plan, selecting D3 design standards with an 800-foot runway extension and certified the environmental impact report. However, soon after the board adopted the master plan, a group filed a claim challenging the board's action. In January of this year, the court largely upheld the county's action with 2 exceptions. The court found that the environmental impact report needed additional noise analysis in response to public comments and determined the county is required to seek an amendment to the conditional use permit from the city of Carlsbad to pursue the D3 safety enhancements. Subsequently, the court ordered the county to set aside all approvals associated with the master plan and environmental impact report, and in May of this year, the Board of Supervisors voted to rescind approval and directed staff to make the necessary changes and return to the board for reconsideration. Staff has now finished making the changes required by the court and has prepared options for the board's consideration. Specifically, staff revised the master plan to state that the county would, without waiving any legal rights, voluntarily seek a conditional use permit amendment should a decision be made to move from a B2 design standard. Staff also conducted additional noise analysis and found no significant impacts and is now included in the environmental impact report. A summary of the edits, the master plan, and the environmental impact report are available to the public via the project website, with hard copies at Palomar and Gillespie airports and in the Carlsbad and San Marcos libraries. Staff is now planning to return to the board on November 3rd to present options for approval of the master plan with improvements with the same B2 and D3 design standard alternatives and runway extension options of up to 900 feet that were previously considered. As the board again considers these design standards, it's valuable to understand their potential economic benefits. To provide this insight, staff commissioned a study to forecast 2 growth scenarios for 2036, which is the end of the planning period of the airport master plan. A no development scenario that forecasts the potential economic impact without further development and no additional commercial service. And a full development scenario that forecasts the potential economic impact with D3 design standards and an 800-foot runway extension recommended by the airport master plan to facilitate forecasted aviation activity. As you can see here, there is a significant difference in the potential economic benefits between the scenarios, which is largely attributable to the return of commercial air service facilitated by the D3 design standards and the runway extension. I will now turn the presentation over to Leanne Carmichael, who leads our Environmental Services Unit, to discuss the airport sustainability.
Thanks, Cam, and good evening, everybody. As well as being an economic engine, it is important to consider sustainability. In line with the county's bold sustainability initiatives, staff has prepared options for the board's consideration to develop sustainability plans that could demonstrate leadership in county and tenant facilities and operations, passenger and ground transportation, and in aircraft operations. The Global Trade Organization for Airlines has committed to transitioning the industry to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. One of the most exciting developments is electric powered aircraft. They could contribute to the transformation the industry needs to meet these goals. And many companies are racing to put them into service. United Airlines recently announced that it had ordered a fleet of 19-seat electric aircraft that are expected to enter service as soon as the year 2026. And Airbus says it plans to have electric aircraft ready to fly by the year 2030. Not only would electric aircraft eliminate their direct carbon emissions, but they could also reduce the noise by nearly 70%. These new aircraft will require specialized support equipment and handling procedures. And airports must make a strategic approach to influence and facilitate the use of these aircraft. The sustainability plans could identify ways to attract and accommodate aircraft at Palomar. In preparation for returning to the Board of Supervisors, staff prepared an extensive community outreach plan for residents, users, businesses, and government entities, including the North County cities. Staff used the project website, email notifications, letters, and phone calls to provide information on the master plan and public meetings. A public informational meeting was held virtually on September 29th. At the end of the meeting, a survey was made available to solicit feedback on the role of the airport in the community and region, safety enhancements, and sustainability. The next public meeting is expected to be November 3rd, when the Board of Supervisors reconsiders the master plan for approval. Staff's recommendation is to adopt the master plan with either the B2 or the D3 design standards and select a runway extension option and certify the EIR and associated documents and provide staff with direction on an airport sustainability plan. If those in attendance at tonight's meeting have an opinion on the airport's design standards, runway extension options, and sustainability, we encourage you to reach out to the Board of Supervisors offices. Attend the hearing on November 3rd, scheduled tentatively, and provide your comments. As directed by the County Board of Supervisors, the duties and responsibilities of the Palomar Airport Advisory Committee include reviewing and making recommendations regarding the development and operations at Palomar Airport. Therefore, staff respectfully request your committee provide a recommendation on the airport design standards, runway extension options, and sustainability. That concludes our presentation, and we're available for questions. Thank you.
Hey, Chuck, I think you're muted, bud.
You got me. Correct. Thank you very much. That was an outstanding presentation, concise and to the point. Any comments from the board regarding the presentation we just saw? Cliff.
Several questions and a couple comments. First off, if the B2 option is chosen, is it hard to move to the D3 in the future, both from a airport downtime and a economic impact?
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yes.
So the airfield's current configuration is a B2 standard. So if the board chose the B2 standard with an enhancement, and the enhancement being an EMAS and perhaps a runway extension, it wouldn't be that much more difficult then in the future to move to D3. It's, the D3 is really the more extensive project because it requires the relocation of the runway. But I don't see, to answer your question, I don't see that it would be limiting to do B2 with the safety enhancements now and D3 later.
Okay, thank you. Second question related is, what is the economic impact of a long-term or perhaps permanent decision to go to B2?
So the airfield is current configuration is B2, and so when the company that did the economic analysis, what they did is they looked at what's the current activity level on the airport, and what is that driving in terms of jobs and economic impact, and we showed you that in the beginning of the presentation. And so what they did is they just extrapolated that out to 2036 without the return of any commercial air service. So that was the no development option. That was essentially, we keep the airfield the way that it is. And then on the other end of the spectrum, they did the full development option to be able to accommodate all of the highest planning activity level as forecasted in the airport master plan, which includes the return of regional air service. So those were bookends. There's not really any, they could not do an analysis in between those bookends because of all of the assumptions that they would have to make really start to degrade the quality of the economic analysis.
Okay, so related to that, is it a true statement that commercial activity will probably not occur unless it converts to a D3?
I would say that there's two limiting factors that really figure into commercial service. The primary factor is the length of the runway. As I mentioned in the presentation, there are no airports in the 48 United States with a runway shorter than 5,000 feet that has commercial service. A lot of airlines, we've spoken to them, a lot of the airlines, their bottom limit for operating at airports is 5,000 feet. Now that's not ubiquitous, it's not true for every airline. Some airlines and aircraft require even more than 5,000 feet, but that seems to be a pretty significant barrier, that 5,000 foot runway. And then after that, the next one would be the D3 safety standards. It's important, and it depends on the aircraft of whether or not that would be a limiting factor or not.
Okay, so related to that, if we do the entire B2 improvements, extending the runway 900 feet, we could get commercial activity. And although the safety standards may not be as good as the D3, we could still accommodate those D3 aircraft very safely based on tower landing those aircraft at the appropriate times.
Yeah, I would say that if the runway was extended beyond 5,000 feet, and in your scenario out to 900 feet, I think that would certainly open up opportunities for commercial service to return to Palomar. In terms of the D3 safety standards, so the FAA applies a different approach to privately owned aircraft and those aircraft that are there for commercial service. So privately owned aircraft, they leave it to the pilot or the owner of the aircraft to determine what airports that they can fly into and out of safely. Commercial service aircraft, it's a little different. So if a commercial airliner wanted to offer regional service at Palomar, for example, and it didn't meet the D3 design standards, the FAA would actually evaluate the airfield and determine whether or not there needed to be some sort of operational restriction put into place to ensure the added safety for those passenger carrying aircraft. So it would be unlikely that the FAA would restrict aircraft from operating at the airfield, but what they may do is implement restrictions while they're operating at the airfield to keep aircraft separated from each other, for example.
Okay, thank you. That's good. That's good info. And the last question, because I heard this from the community. Let's say 10 years down the line, all of us are gone and moved on to other positions, and the current leaders decide that they want to remove all the facilities on the south side of the airport to allow Palomar to turn into John Wayne.
Mm. I've heard that comment a number of times. I can certainly relate to the concerns of that the people are raising. But the reality of it is that we simply at Palomar do not have the physical space to be able to accommodate larger airliners like the 737. And one of the other and in addition to the space requirements, you talked about maybe clearing the land, so to speak, and then putting in a larger terminal to be able to accommodate it. Well, the issue there is that the county has entered into long-term lease agreements, and by long-term, I mean 50-year lease agreements with folks on the airfield to be able to provide services. Those people and businesses have actually constructed expensive facilities on the airport to be able to provide those services. So one is that if we tried to clear the land, so to speak, we would have to break all of those leases, which is simply unlikely. And then the other thing is that we would essentially be getting rid of the very organizations that provide service on the airport. So these organizations that are on the airport that are leasing this property, they actually fuel aircraft and maintain those aircraft. Those are the service providers. So by essentially eliminating those services on the airport, we won't be able to take care of the aircraft anyway. So it's not from a practical and a legal and a contractual basis, as well as the limitations of the airfield. It's just not possible, even if we wanted to.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Humphreys, and thank you, Chairman. Those were very good explanations for my questions. I appreciate that. Much clarity, for me at least. And as disclosure, I am an active private pilot out of Palomar, and I fully support the expansion of the airport per the master plan update.
Wynn,
Chair, I think
believe
you're
you
muted.
had your hand up at the same time a moment ago.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Don't know who to address to. I have a number of questions, but I'll keep it to just a couple. Cliff, you had some good questions. Thank you. When we look at the airport shifting to the north, the runway, excuse me, shifting to the north a little bit, it looks like it takes over some of that north parking area. I believe we have 300 planes on the property. What happens to those 300 planes that are on the property?
It's a really insightful question. And Mr. Chair, if I might, I'm sorry, I should have asked if it was okay for me to respond. And I might actually have Olivier jump in on this one, but it's a really insightful question. The short answer is that we would have to relocate those aircraft to other parts of the airfield. We don't have, those 300 aircraft are on the northern part, the northern parking ramp. I don't recall how many we have there. Maybe Olivier can say. We do have areas in the southern part of the airfield that could accommodate those aircraft, but we would have to remove that parking lot or that aircraft ramp space. Olivier, did you want to jump in with how many aircraft that are currently parked up there?
Currently, in the neighborhood of 50 or less. It fluctuates how many people are there. We have 130 spots, so I believe we have a little under 50. I don't have an exact figure, but if they aren't able to be absorbed onto other parts of the airport, There is an area, it's labeled number 10. It's in the master plan on that one diagram. It's on the south side of the airport, behind the Royal Jet hangar. It's an area that's been designated as an area that we could build up for tie down of small aircraft that were displaced from the north.
Gotcha. So we don't feel there'd be any disruption to those planes, I guess is what I'm asking. We could find a home for them, for the locals, if they have a plane there.
We believe so. Yep.
Okay. My next question would be, I don't hold me to this, but I believe United, when they were flying from Palomar to LAX, they stated one of the reasons they were leaving was because of the length of the runway. And that was a problem with their new fleet of airlines that they were, or airplanes, excuse me, that they were bringing in. Do we have any IOIs from commercial carriers that are proactively suggesting, hey, if you do X, we'll do Y?
I'm not, what's an IOI?
Indication of interest. I love it when I get Olivier on acronyms. Like, it's my favorite thing in the world when I get him on an
He
acronym.
does zing me. He gets me. So we have spoken to airlines in the past, and they've indicated that if we had a longer runway, yes, they would be interested, but they understand their capital improvement projects. There's lots of layers of approvals, and it's not something that's done overnight. So a lot of their route planning people are looking for those facilities that are built now, or maybe they're in the build phase of that particular project, and then they can start looking and committing. Okay, we can look at that. Whereas a place like us, we don't have any. There's no dirt turning, so there's no. Frankly, we don't have a plan approved. So there's nothing for them to be able to commit to. Now, when we met with SkyWest, they did say, we went to their headquarters. They said, if you did have a longer runway, then that's something. Then we would take a much harder look at you. But in the current configuration, they just couldn't do it.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, and lastly for me, I think I've been pretty vocal about this since my time on this committee. That is, it appears in at least the Carlsbad community's perspective, or several of the members of the community, that it's the pilot schools that tend to drive most of the frustration from a noise perspective. Would extending this runway add additional noise from bigger planes, or potentially remove noise from those smaller planes that now can't participate as much because there are bigger planes coming in, if that question makes sense?
It's a great question, and the simple answer is yes. So the runway itself has a finite capacity. It can only handle so many aircraft flights in a given hour or a given day. And it is also true that when you are in a small aircraft and you're trying to conduct training, commercial aircraft on approach or takeoff have priority. And so what that means is that oftentimes that aircraft are in the traffic pattern and trying to get traffic pattern work in are delayed, or they extend their pattern waiting for a commercial carrier to take off and land. So what ends up happening is that folks in smaller aircraft that don't want to delay, they'll move off to another airport to be able to conduct that training. And I'm not saying that that's a wholesale case. But the reality of it is that commercial service airports, or airports with regular daily commercial service, tends to have less smaller aircraft traffic.
Okay. I lied. I'm going to ask one last question. Is it at all possible to get a soft or firm commitment before making a B2 or a D3 decision from a commercial carrier?
I would say that, so it's a difficult one to answer. I would say that, as Olivier stated, from their perspective, they live a little bit more in the present. It's fairly hard for them to commit to something that is probably 10 years out. It's going to take some time so assuming for the moment that the board of supervisors decided to extend the runway and I don't know, pick B2 or D3, and that a commercial carrier could operate, it's going to, it's probably going to take the better part of 10 or more years to be able to make that happen. And so it's a little difficult for an airline to commit to that. But here's what I would say. Airlines operate on a for-profit basis. And what they do is they evaluate, first of all, where is there really strong demand for air service, and where can they move their mobile asset, the aircraft, to be able to leverage the most profit out of that particular piece of equipment. North County has about 1 million people in it, in an area that is closer to Palomar than, say, one of the other airports. And so there's really strong demand for air service there. So from my perspective, this is just my opinion after being in this business for a long time, I think that the environment is very conducive for a commercial carrier to come in here, assuming that it had a runway or the facilities that they could operate in.
Yeah, I agree with that, Cam. I think there is some demand for service here. My fear with that would be that the infrastructure surrounding the airport couldn't keep up. You can't expand Palomar Airport Road. You can't expand El Camino Real. I don't think you can expand the 5 anymore based on the Coastal Commission. That's my understanding. It'd be tough to get those people there. The mall,
Sure.
the Carlsbad Mall that was going to go in the flower fields, as an example, one of the main reasons it was finally struck down was because of the infrastructure couldn't expand to support it. That's some
Yeah.
of my fear.
And I think that's a fear that a lot of folks share and maybe Leanne can jump in here and talk a little bit about the environmental impact review that was done. But let me just say that I'm going to go back to what I had mentioned. We did this study, it's called a leakage study, and we determined based on airline data and credit card data, how many people are using air service within a given distance around an airport. So as I mentioned in the presentation, or Olivier mentioned in the presentation, we looked at a, essentially 15 miles around Palomar Airport. And that 15 miles is generating 14,000 people a day that are traveling to get on an aircraft to go somewhere, either coming into Carlsbad or leaving. Those are 14,000 folks that are on the road to get to those airports. So we already have people that are using the roads and the infrastructure. Now, of course, they may not be using it right around Palomar, but I do know that looking at traffic is one of the requirements of CEQA to understand its impacts. And Leanne, do you want to jump in? Do you have any more comments on that part of it?
Well, yeah. We do have major roads in that area, and we do have some congestion along those at those peak hours. What our traffic study and just going out to the airport quite often shows is that the rest of the day, other than those peak hours, we've got some pretty good infrastructure out there that can handle that. And with the flights that we're looking at, we're still looking at those small commuter planes, those regional. The commercial would be those small regional jets. So 30 passenger and 70 passenger, and that doesn't put a lot of strain on the infrastructure because those aren't always at peak hour. Those are throughout the day, and unlike a business that kind of opens their doors at 8 and closes at 5, or an office building, something like that, where the workers are a little more hitting those peak hours. The airport pretty much meters that along throughout the day. So traffic wasn't really found to be much of an impact. We did have the intersections, those major intersections. Yeah, at peak hour, we'll have to really watch our flight schedule so that we don't overload those areas. But even at the highest level that the master plan contemplated, you really are metering those throughout the day and not just all hitting those peak hours. So it's not so bad with the major infrastructure we have in that area.
Great. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the extended time. I appreciate it. I appreciate the answers, everybody.
Thank you. John, you're next.
Thanks. I just have, I guess, mostly a couple of comments. Coming from a facilities background and formerly a professional engineer, having done a lot of major construction projects, I would actually disagree with Cam a little bit on the B2 then going to B3 scenario versus just going straight to D3. It's going to double the complexity, increase a lot of the cost, waste a lot of time. And I think, we should just go straight to D3. Now, if we have to, for maybe political reasons or whatever else, to go to B2 first, then go to B3, then I guess we'll do that. But it'll be a lot, and being a taxpayer, I don't like to see, those dollars wasted and time wasted and effort wasted. So, just do it once, don't do it twice, because that's essentially what you're redoing if you first go to the extension with B2 and it's not an airport expansion, it's a runway extension. So I just want to make sure that we don't use the words, airport expansion, because it is not that. And let's see, what was the other thing I was going to say? No. Okay, let's see. Should have wrote it down, right? Oh, well, that's the main thing I wanted to say. And, thanks, Cam, very much. That was a great presentation. I've seen this now a couple times, different venues. And so it's nice to see how well you guys have laid it all out. And the graphics that you've used are really nice for showing all the different elements and everything. So great job and thank you.
Thank you. John, thank you very much. Jim, you have a question for some of these people? You're on mute, Jim.
Now you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. I do have a question and a comment. I agree with John's evaluation of that. And it's my understanding that to get some of the safety funding features, which most of it is funded through FAA dollars from the federal government, if we go for a B3, it'll be harder to qualify for some of those safety things. And then if in the future it goes to a D3, whatever was done with the B3, like the EMAS and the runway extension, will have to be redone a second time with new funding. And it's not something you just add to it because of the nature of moving the runway slightly north. So that is my comment. And I think we talked a little bit about the north parking ramp. And I remember back in 2006 when the airport did a lot of upgrade to facilities. And at that time, I may be wrong with the numbers here, but I think they're essentially close. And Olivier can probably know better. But we had something like around 200,000 aircraft operations back at that time, majority of which were small aircraft, the majority of which our noise complaints come from. And after the upgrading of the facilities on the airport, the buildings and such, we, over the years, treated about half of those, and we're probably around 200 or maybe even a little less small aircraft right now. And doing these improvements, bringing in the larger aircraft, causes difficulty in a training situation for small aircraft as far as separation and runway acceptance numbers and things like that. So I believe that D3 out of the door is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. John, you have another thing to add?
Yeah, the thing I wanted to mention is that, let's say we are at the D3, and, thinking about like airplanes and, how they're using the facility and the space around the airport. Well, all the larger planes, and the commercial airlines will all be instrument rated. They'll be able to come in and land, over appropriate zoned, light industrial. They can, the majority of the time when we have a wind coming off the ocean, they'll go straight out over the ocean and then, proceed to go from there. There'll be brand new equipment, quiet. If there's a marine layer, no issue because they're instrument rated. They can go straight out. They don't have to veer to the left or right and go over homes. They'll go right over the golf course and so forth. So I don't think that's going to be an issue, with the D3 and those commercial flights, and they'll be and potentially be even quieter if it does chase away some of the activity with the smaller planes, as Cam mentioned. It'll be actually quieter airport. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, John. Anybody else have comments here, Cliff?
I'd like to
Yes,
ask a question.
comment on Wynn's comments is, as a private pilot that has recently been checked out on a newer aircraft, I've experienced the delays of taking off and landing at Palomar Airport in a four-seater Cessna 182, for example. Typically, airfields allow touch and goes, and oftentimes Palomar does not allow that because they're just frankly too busy. And so you sit on the taxiway waiting behind 2 or 3 or 4 airplanes at $140 to $180 an hour of engine time to be able to take off. So there is a significant impact if private aircraft and training and other similar services are removed from the aircraft because of greater, larger aircraft and commercial service. I'm not opposed to that. I just want to make that point. The other thing I want to make a comment about is that many of us, if not all of us, have heard that there have been 2 recent airplane incidents here in the San Diego area. And I think that's pertinent to this discussion because anytime there's a discussion about increased aircraft activity at any particular airport, that means there's an increased possibility, whatever the rate, small or large, of more aircraft incidents. And so back on late August, there was a airplane that landed and crashed on Interstate 5. And just last week, there was an airplane that crashed at Gillespie Field or in the vicinity of Gillespie Field. And, those may not directly impact Palomar per se, but I think the concerns of the community are that if you have more aircraft, the likelihood of an aircraft incident also increases. And I agree with that statement. So the community needs to be informed about these aircraft incidents as it relates to any increased traffic at Palomar Airport. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gordon, did you have a comment or?
No, I have a quick question. I see that there's a motion we're going to be voting on. Is that to recommend to the board one of these options?
I have put together a motion, but the motion is, we're going to kind of discuss and come up with what we're going to do, and we'll get to that in a minute. Any other comments from people on the board? Lena, do we have public comment on this?
We did receive a speaker slip from Giovanni Bertuzzi. However, his slip indicated that he will not be attending the meeting and he just wanted his comments given to PAC.
And those were sent out earlier this evening?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to clarify a comment that I made earlier. There was a question about, if there was a problem with doing B2 now and D3 later, and I took that to mean a technical issue. So I just wanted to clarify that if there would be a technical problem with it. I think that the folks on the committee very astutely noted that it would be actually more expensive to do B2 now with a runway extension and EMAS, and then to go to D3 later. And there is also the question, EMAS is not required for the B2 design standards. So we would have to request under the B2, we would have to request the FAA to essentially consider EMAS, even though it's not a requirement for B2. So there is potentially some level of funding challenges with the B2 with the EMAS. So I did want to clarify that, and the committee members very astutely noted that.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple thoughts or comments. Kevin, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Late comment. Yeah, I just want to, Cam, just what you just said. Right now, we have the majority of our business jets coming in are D3. That's what you said in the beginning of the presentation. So right now, we're already operating at that D3 standard without the appropriate safety or enhanced safety measures. So it would seem to me prudent to want to implement those as soon as possible. After, if this carries. Is the funding there already for the EMAS? Is it standing by, or is it something we need to go after via grant?
Yeah, so no, the funding, there's no funding that's standing by. That I do want to mention, talk a little bit about the funding. So generally speaking, our 8 county airports, Palomar included, are eligible for some level of grant funding. Palomar in particular, because it's a commercial service airport, is eligible for grant funding. And on eligible projects, the FAA generally provides up to 90% of the costs. And in the case of the D3 design standards, the FAA is very interested. Their own guidance is that an airport should pursue the design standards that are commensurate with the critical aircraft, the largest, fastest aircraft using the airport currently. And we've had conversations with them, and they would be very interested in being able to provide grants for Palomar to be able to meet the D3 design standards. They recognize that there are the D3 aircraft operating there. They also recognize that commercial service really ended because of the runway length and, to a lesser extent, the design standards. And they would frankly like to see commercial service return to Palomar. From their perspective, Palomar is part of the national air transportation system, and they want it to be as safe and open to the public as possible.
So with that, with the runway extension, what's the if we're trying to reach that 5,000, I mean, we're talking 100 and something feet, right? To 200 feet basically. What's the advantage of going to 600 feet or past the 200-foot mark?
So in the topic of runways, more is better. The more runway that you have, the more stopping distance that you have for aircraft and takeoff distance. And it also opens up the opportunity for aircraft to be able to operate, but more importantly, to be able to operate at higher gross weights. So when you have a short runway, a lot of times aircraft owners and operators, what they do to be able to operate into and out of that airfield is that they have to reduce the gross weight of the aircraft. And how do they do that? They do it in passengers, in baggage, and in fuel. So they're limiting the amount of fuel and the number of passengers and the amount of cargo or baggage that they're carrying, which makes the aircraft less efficient and it reduces the range of the aircraft. So alternatively, if you have a longer runway, not only is it safer, it increases the operational efficiency of the aircraft.
So one more question on about runway length. So if we're looking at the touchdown point on the runway, has that been chirped out in any manner yet? Like, have we said, okay, if the runway was 600 feet longer, have we done the design? Have we looked at that type of situation?
We, other than a schematic design and, essentially, you probably are aware of this, but just for the benefit of everybody that might be here, part of the master plan is what's called the airport layout plan. An airport layout plan is nothing more than a set of drawings that depicts the airfield and what it might look like, once all of the improvements in the master plan are built out. And so certainly it's evaluated from that perspective, and then the approach and departure corridors are looked at for obstruction surfaces and all of that. But that's a preliminary. When you actually move to the design phase, you really get into looking at all of what you're talking about. The TERPs is evaluating it from an aircraft instrument approach standpoint.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. When?
That prompted one last question. Kevin suggested that, and everyone said this as well, but it just sparked the thought that we have several D3 landing just today, despite the fact that it's a B2 designated airport. Is it, I guess, somewhat fair to assume, regardless of parking, because I don't think they would care about parking if they wanted to land, what would guarantee the community, for lack of a better term, that an E5 wouldn't land on the D3? And I assume they're going to push the limit. They're pushing it today. Why wouldn't they try to push it further?
Yeah,
If
that's
I could
I'm sorry.
respond to that-
Forgive me.
If I could respond to that, there's the
Mr.
difference.
Chair, absolutely.
There's a different standard for commercial operations, and commercial operations cannot push the limit. It's the non-commercial operations that have that greater flexibility.
But I would assume there's non-commercial airlines that are greater than D3, or airplanes, excuse me, that are greater than D3. I would assume there's several, military or what have you.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
it really comes down to a wingtip clearance issue and the facilities on the airport. I mean, the county not only is committed not to go beyond the fence line, but we've also committed not to impact our users. And as Cam mentioned earlier, we're not wiping out the very people we have an airport to support. And we're not taking out our own customers on the airport that provide the very services that the aircraft and users need. So to support anything larger, like Boeing 737s, or, you said something, we don't have the ground space for those aircraft to move. I mean, physically don't have it.
Nor do we have the load-bearing capability of the runway.
Yeah.
So, any further comments? I have a few. I recall the original master
Hey,
plan.
Chuck, forgive my interruption. Can you restate your comment about the load bearing about the runway?
Olivier, you maybe can help me on this. The load standard of the runway is 110,000 pounds.
For dual tandem wheeled aircraft, yes.
Okay, and that 110,000 pound limitation would rule out virtually all the Boeing class airplanes by 40% of their weight.
They could still land light. The problem is, if you're running an airline, you need to maximize the capabilities of your aircraft with passengers and fuel to get to the destinations and make the profit that you need to make. If you're coming in light and leaving light, then that cuts directly into your, increases your operating costs and decreases your profits. So
yeah, there's just no way that it can be done in my eyes. But
So there's no way that I could be, I think I've shared this. I fly more commercial than probably anybody on this list combined. And I get rerouted from San Diego constantly for one reason or another. It's a marine layer, it's something or other, and they send me to John Wayne. And that happens, it happens several times a year for me. Would that now Carlsbad be open to that?
you
It'd
mean
be
to
coming in
receive
light,
those
they're low on
airplanes?
fuel.
So would we be a divert we could not be a divert for the larger commercial aircraft, the type of aircraft that are flying in John Wayne, the 7.3s, the 7.5s, they couldn't fit. So we wouldn't be available on the list of alternates that those airlines are using. But we'd have to be on an approved, that airline would have to have us approved as a alternate for them to use. It's not just a controller saying, oh, the weather's bad at this airport. Well, we'll just send you down the road to Carlsbad. That's not how that is. I mean, I'm not a pilot. Cam, he flew a complex large aircraft. He could speak to this much better than I. But it's not just flying to a commercial airport. That commercial airport has to be designated as an alternate.
Cam, yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to mention, I think Wynn is asking a question that's on the minds of a lot of folks, is, well, if we go to D3, well, what about the even larger aircraft? And the reality of it is that, what we've been trying to get to is this idea that the aircraft that are currently operating on the airfield, the D3 aircraft, are really the largest aircraft that can operate. Because of the physical constraints and other limitations of the airfield. And, Olivier had a really good analogy that, you might be able to run a semi truck down a residential street occasionally, but there's no way that you're going to run a super wide load, that you see where they have to have the pilot cars down a residential road, because it simply won't fit. And that's the case with the larger aircraft. Wynn had brought up, the E5 aircraft. It just simply will not fit on the airport. So there's a number of constraints, physical constraints about the airfield that really the aircraft that are operating now are really at the limit of what the airport can handle.
Okay. I have a couple comments that I would like to make at this point in time, seeing that there's no other comments right now. But if I bring something up, I'm happy for you guys to weigh in on it. Number one, the two-step B2 then to D3, doing it in steps. I remember in the original master plan, there was a price for doing that. And I don't remember exactly what that price was, but I remember that price was substantial. And so I think that was a stated fact somewhere, and we could probably find that if we look for it. The next item was the idea of getting airplanes to operate in and out of here from as a B2. And they were talking about the possibilities of getting an FAA waiver to do that. I find that to be very complex and difficult. There's an airport in Florida, Stewart, Florida, and what I recall about it, and Kevin, you may have some firsthand knowledge on this. I'm not sure, but Stewart, Florida, was able to get a waiver, but then some other airports followed, and the FAA basically told everybody that they weren't going to grant those type of waivers, which was a waiver as it related to it's a B2 configuration. The idea of tearing down facilities and turning it into a big airport is not at all viable, but I want to make sure everybody's aware that we have committed to stay within our boundaries, and it would take a vote of the people to get out of, or to expand out of the the boundary. And then something that we haven't talked about and maybe isn't part of the master plan, but it is very important. Earlier last month, the FAA approved the Gulfstream G280 as an operational airplane that is the first airplane to meet the new stringent stage 5 sound levels. Consequently, what is happening is the fleet of airplanes technology is going to make quieter and quieter. And in our 20-year plan, those will become more and more prevalent in doing that. Those were my thoughts that I wanted to pass along to that. And nobody's waving violently at me. I would like for us to make a motion. The motion we can kind of adjust. Olivier, I think we put together, I put together this motion, and PAC recommends the San Diego County Board of Supervisors approves the airport master plan incorporating the D3 safety design standards and the associated PEIR. Additionally, explore options with a keen focus on sustainability. Any comments coming from that or on that? Cliff?
Yeah, I like that motion a lot, but if there was some way we could incorporate some of the really good comments and responses that came out of this meeting into that memo that goes to the Board of Supervisors, that would be supreme, because this meeting was incredible in regards to the questions and the answers provided by the county.
I believe we had a solicitation that invited each of us to send correspondence to the supervisors. And I would like for each of us to send out, I have already sent one to all the supervisors, and maybe a 3 or 4 point concise and to the point thing, actually stating your concerns and thoughts. I think that would be appropriate. Abby, you've been kind of quiet tonight, and I know you've been trying to dodge the bullet, but I want to give you some credit for the explore the options with a keen focus verbiage. And I think you have some good comments on that so we can understand that. And Olivia, you might have some too, but Abby, you first.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it. I would agree. I like the language of the motion, and in particular, I think it's really important that we include something mentioning that the future of the airport needs to incorporate a focus on sustainability. As I listened to all the questions back and forth in the comments, you know, I'm struggling to not deviate too far off topic, but I think about an issue of perception. So what we're talking about is hopefully here making a suggestion and adopting a master plan that embraces what we're doing today in terms of the critical aircraft we're seeing today, and also accepts the future of where the aviation industry is going in terms of these D3 aircraft being more and more prevalent at our airport and airports all over our country. And, you know, right along in step with that future is the aviation industry's incredible focus and embrace of sustainable efforts. You know, this week is actually the NBAA conference in Vegas. Some of you were probably there, and I know that my cohorts with Atlantic Aviation had dozens of meetings with vendors and suppliers, all focused on sustainable efforts, whether it's sustainable aviation fuel, which we already sell at facilities in our network in the United States, being Atlantic Aviation. Signature Flight Support sells it, you know, at their facilities. Lots and lots of FBOs sell it. Other efforts including carbon offset programs, the embrace of electric aircraft. So that is where the aviation industry is going. that's where the real movers and shakers in this industry are focused. And I just keep thinking this is our opportunity to show that Palomar's focused on the future too, that we're going to move our airport in the right direction, that we're embracing the opportunities that we have to really set the course for the future that we would all end up being really proud of. So again, struggling to fit it into the nature of the conversation we've been having, but thank you, Chuck, for the opportunity. And I really think that that's an important portion to include in our motion, because the future of the aviation industry embraces sustainability. That's where the real players are going. And we want our actions as an airport to reflect that we're embracing the future too.
When I'll get to you in a second. Olivier, this is probably not what you said, and it's probably not even what I heard, but it's probably what I thought. And that was, if we were doing the process of moving to a B3, or I'm sorry, a D3 airport, in that funding, there would be substantial paths of sustainability we could move through. Can you tell me what I didn't hear, or however you want to say that, Olivier?
Well, Leanne might be the better person to talk about sustainability. I mean, it is something that Leanne went over in the presentation. We've talked about, and we're looking to weave into the master plan. But that's something that we'll be asking the board to make a decision on exactly how we do that.
Well,
that certainly is part of the county's focus.
And what I understood were things that potentially could be on the horizon was LED runway lighting, charging stations, modernizing all our buildings with a new LED type lighting. So there was a big wave of stuff that I thought was possibly there, but I understand. Wynn, did you have a remark?
Yeah, I think this will shock most people. I'd like to make a recommendation to the motion to get my vote. And based on the current climate, and people may or may not agree with me, but at least the people in Carlsbad that communicate with me, they have a lack of trust with this airport for one reason or another, and I can't explain why. I think it generally goes back to noise and the fact that there's and safety. There's a fear that planes are going to hit their homes because they're flying so low. And unfortunately, based on the events that have happened recently, that has come true. So what I'd like to see in the motion, if we could, the way that I've written it, is the last sentence. Additionally, explore options with a keen focus on sustainability, safety, and noise. Period.
Anybody have comments on that? Yes, sir.
I don't have a comment on what Wynn just said, but so if someone else would like to comment on what he said, then go ahead. I have something else I wanted to bring up.
Go ahead, Gordon.
You can go first.
Let's see. I guess earlier when I started to ask this question, you suggested I should wait. So here it is. Hey, this isn't the first time we've been down this road. My question is, what did the PAC recommend to the Board of Supervisors last time we were at this stage?
What I recall was it.
Does anybody have the exact statement of what the board finally voted for?
I have a pretty good recollection of it, if I may, and maybe people can weigh in on it. That the county staff had a recommendation. I took exception to that recommendation, and I made a motion that basically said, go do a D3 design standard airport now. And we took a vote and that split evenly, 3-3. So consequently, it didn't pass. Staff's recommendation was a D3 via the process of staying a B2, and that motion carried, and that's how I recall it. Anybody recall it? Cliff?
I think that's pretty close, if not exact. But then what happened is when it went down to the Board of Supervisors and they heard all the information and arguments, they said, well, they want to go with the D3.
That's how I understood it too. Ann, did you
I was
wait?
there.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I have the 2018 board letter in front of me with the PAC statement, which read that recommended by a vote of 5-1 in favor that the board approve the master plan with a B2 enhanced alternative, including options 1, 2, and 3, which allow a runway extension of up to 900 feet over the existing inactive landfill, and direct staff to return to the board in the future for further consideration of the D3 modified standards compliance alternative if a viable solution can be found to alleviate land use concerns and RPC issues. So basically, yes, because that was staff's.
Excuse me, someone's not muted. Please check your muting.
I think it's Win.
I think it was my husband in the background, sorry.
Okay, great. Well, that's interesting statement. Thank you very much. I have no other comments.
John.
I have a, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I think we should take this further on the sustainability. I mean, how about something along the lines of explore options to make Palomar Airport a national leader in sustainability, a national leader, a gem within the state and within the nation. And I think that would really create a lot of excitement among our current elected supervisors.
Jim?
Back when we got the briefing, I think, was it Leanne that gave the environmental briefing earlier tonight?
Yeah.
She said something about 3 different things. One of them was the B2, D3, which we have in this recommendation. The other one was sustainability, which we have something in this. And the third one, I can't remember what it was, but I thought it probably should be included.
Runway length.
Yeah, that was there, but that's not what I was thinking of. Anyway, I can't remember what it was. So.
Well, I mean, we're going to be asking the Board of Supervisors to certify the EIR. That may have been it.
That might have been it.
Yeah.
Returning to the recommendation, Win. Okay. I really kind of like what Win added. I think it would be great for us to have a keen focus on sustainability, safety, and noise. I think that's might be something very consistent. Abby, do you feel that diminishes or lowers the focus on sustainability? Because we do have that first on the list.
Yeah, no, not at all. I was going to offer my support for that as well. I think that is an appropriate focus for this PAC, and I think it makes sure that we stay in line with what our directives are as a PAC. But yeah. I think that accomplishes what all of us really care about on this group.
And I would even go further and say I liked keen focus has a very big meaning to me. but I also thought it would be a national leader or a nation leader. What was the verbiage that was thrown out that we'd be number
John.
one or?
John?
Yeah, become a national example or a national leader on
Yeah,
sustainability in a small airport or however you want it. You know, there's a million
I
ways you
think
could
that
say.
additionally,
I would like to add that on the noise thing, though, I'm a little bit concerned about saying that just because, you know, this is the FAA has the bigger impact on noise, not the airport itself. So I don't want to put something in writing that puts hope into people's hearts that we would somehow impact noise when we really have no control over that.
Chuck? Chuck, it's me, Kevin. Or
yes, Kevin.
Okay. Yes.
You weren't pictured, and so I couldn't see you
I
waving.
know, way over there, yeah, or wherever, yeah. Anyway, I really like what Wynn said as well. I was gonna chime in on that. I would put safety first. I would put this keen focus on safety, sustainability. I like the national leader. I like the noise, and I'll tell you why I like the noise is because I'm on a couple different things that I'm doing right now. One of them is noise, and you're exactly right. The FAA determines what has a big impact on the noise and what the airport does. However, to focus the community on noise, to focus the airport authority, the county, this committee on noise is what I think we need to say. And I like that's why I think that it's important for us to put that to the forefront in this recommendation, in this statement. Because noise is a big deal, and noise is a community concern as a whole. So we have to acknowledge it, and the FAA does what they do, but we can be champions of that for our own destiny. Also, I like the Jim. I don't know what it was about the runway extension, but I do think that should be in here somewhere as well. I think that the safety design standards, with the runway extension in there, and whatever that's going to be. But I think that probably needs to be addressed as well.
Cam, that might be a question for you. I thought the verbiage D3 safety standard designs spoke specific to one segment of the master plan presentation, which included the EMAS, the extended runway, and moving it around. Is that true?
Mr. Chair, yes. So it's true that the D3 design standards include EMAS, and the D3 design standards also require a 370-foot longer runway, but it could be extended out to 800 feet. So the board will have the option, if they choose the D3 standard, of either a 370-foot runway extension or an 800-foot runway extension. So staff, when we put our request together for this committee to provide a recommendation, we respectfully requested your consideration of what this committee prefers in a runway extension.
I believe most of us would like the 800-foot extension. Do we need to say D3 design standards with 800-foot runway to be concise, or does this say it?
I would say, from my perspective, if you're asking staff, I would say that I would add that if that's the committee's desire, is to include it in the recommendation.
Cliff?
Yeah, my understanding is that the 800 versus 900 extension is not related directly to aircraft runway extensions. It has to do with the safety requirements versus where the runway is. So I don't think we should include that recommendation, 800 versus 900, in the motion. That said, I think that the additional statements about the sustainability are uncalled for, or for safety, because the D3 safety standard, or even the B3 recommendation, or the B2 recommendation, already include safety standards in their proposals. So I think that the PAC recommendation proposal or the motion proposal is correct as stated.
Cam?
Mr. Chair, I would like to clarify. So the options that the board will have for the runway extension is under the B2 design standards. They can either choose not to extend the runway, extend the runway 200 feet, or extend the runway up to 900 feet. So that's under the B2 design standards. Under the D3 design standards, they have the option of either 370-foot runway extension or a 800-foot runway extension. And there's technical reasons for the difference, but suffice it to say, and I'm happy to answer questions if the committee has, but suffice it to say under D3, there's two runway options, 370-foot or 800-foot. And under the B2, there's three. So there's no runway extension, 200-foot, and a 900-foot.
I'm of the opinion the D3 safety design standards, if we don't address the runway length, there can be questions of funding, can be all kinds of questions. And I do believe that we'll get another bite of the apple when they get around to figuring out whether it's that. And the D3 with the runway extension, that's what is paramount to get us over 5,000 square feet. So I think that's enough. When you've heard some comments regarding this, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, an 800 or 900-foot extension makes me a little bit uncomfortable. If I'm being honest hearing that. I don't necessarily suggest that we put that in there. I agree with what Kevin suggested earlier, that safety goes first, sustainability, and then noise. And I would
Okay.
call it a day with that, in my opinion.
Anybody have strong objections to that? I don't hear any strong objections. John?
Well, I would like to understand the proposed motion if it's amended from what we have on the screen.
Who asked that question?
I'd like to understand. I'd like to understand what we end up with the length of the runway if we don't say anything in this motion. Do we just who decides then if it's 370 or 800?
Cam, can you answer that? I think the county supervisor.
Well, it's ultimately the board's decision of whether or not they're going to approve the B2 or the D3 design standards. And with it, they have those runway extension, and they'll make a selection between those runway extension options.
They're not making that selection at this time. They're going to just decide whether it's a D3.
No, they will. They will make the selection for the runway extension at this board hearing.
Okay.
But shouldn't we, as the experts, so to speak, in this area, tell them which one to select?
I retract my last statement, and I agree with John on this one. If they are truly voting on that at this meeting on November 3rd, I change my opinion that we should absolutely call out. And personally, I would be uncomfortable at 800 plus. I would support the 370 with the additional noise and safety components. And I mean, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I can read out what I would suggest.
Okay.
And I would say the PAC recommends the San Diego County Board of Supervisors approves the airport master plan incorporating the D3 safety standards and a 370-foot runway expansion and associated PEIR. Additionally, explore options with a keen focus on safety, sustainability, and noise. And let me change the word expansion to extension. Pardon me.
Yeah. And also from a safety point of view, longer runway is more safety. So I think we have a little contradiction if we say we want 370, but we want to focus on safety. That doesn't make sense.
John, I think that's true. Any other comment on that? When I would really like to accommodate your concerns, but right now, unless somebody starts waving their hands and would like to talk about it, I'm ready to get to the point where we can sit down and say, PAC recommends the San Diego County Board of Supervisors approves the airport master plan incorporating the D3 safety standards and an 800-foot runway extension and associated PEIR. Additionally, explore options to keep, I'm going to say, keen focus on safety, substantive, that word, and noise. Cliff.
I move the motion.
I have something
Question.
to say before you
Okay, Win.
take a second on that. I think Win does too. This is Jim, and I heard Leanne say that the board is also going to consider the EIR. And why isn't the PAC making a recommendation on that included in this? I mean, that's the title of this motion is PAC recommendation.
Well, I
for
think
their
it's included.
considerations.
Isn't the PEIR what we're talking about?
I don't know, is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the PEIR stands for Program or Project. Leanne can jump in here. Environmental Impact Report.
And
Right.
that's what was the issue in the lawsuit. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That is correct.
And that was just.
That's one of the issues.
And it was part of the PEIR. It wasn't the whole plan. It was just a couple, or what the judge ruled, if I understand correctly, was there were 2 or 3 elements that didn't measure up to what
Yeah.
it should.
Leanne can jump in here and explain that part of it. I think that she would be best to explain that part of the PEIR. Leanne, are you still with us? Are you able to?
Oh, absolutely. So, yes, I think this motion, for one, does incorporate the approval of the program EIR in the motion already. The court did rule that the vast majority of the EIR was fine and sided with us on that. But they did have a minor change to the noise analysis that we did. They wanted us to go farther out to the folks that had said noise was an issue for their particular home. So we went further out into the various cities farther out away from the airport, and we did an analysis of those. It did not change the findings in the EIR, and so we were able to do that relatively quickly. And then the other issue that the court ruled was what Cam had already mentioned earlier about the should we go to the D3. We'll need to work with the city of Carlsbad to rectify the conditional use permit that they have on that.
I understand.
Yeah.
So could if PEIR, PEIR is the environmental impact report, could we say that?
Yeah, you could spell it out if you'd like.
You rather than the
Yes.
acronym, you would like to have it spelled out completely.
Yeah. For dummies
Okay.
like me, I didn't recognize it, so I'm sure there are others out there.
Okay.
No, that's good. That's good to be precise.
Okay. Cliff, does that change anything in your motion?
I still have
No,
my,
not at all. No, not at all.
Anybody?
I agree with the motion for the presentation slide with the explanation of what PEIR is.
Okay.
Whoever's screen is being shared, is that an editable document? Can we just edit it on the fly here and have it read what we want to approve?
Well, if I may, I think I have it on my screen. I know Win wants to make comments still.
Yeah,
I believe I have it edited, but we'll check with it. I'll read it out loud, make sure you're happy with it, make sure Lena's got it and then with whatever the final happens to be.
My question was for Cam or whomever was going through the presentation. The example you showed of the runway expansion, I believe it was the D3 example. What was that extension? Was it 370 or 900 feet?
So we showed, Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yes.
So we showed 2 slides. One was for the B2 and one was for the D3. On the B2, we showed a 0, 200 foot and a 900 foot extension option. And for the D3, we showed a 370 foot and an 800 foot extension. And I'm happy, if we want to, we can certainly bring those slides back up if you'd like.
That'd be great.
Ann,
like
are
to
you
see
still
what-
with us? Can you bring up that slide?
I
Hey,
am.
Wynn,
Just
what
give me
is
one
the
moment.
concern with the 800 and the 370?
I didn't realize there were options, Jim, and I might have just misheard. I was under the impression we were going for a roughly 300 foot expansion. I'll tell you what the concern from the community will be is that it's
Yeah.
going to go back to the bigger planes coming. If it's 1,000 feet, it's going to be received much more poorly than a 370 foot expansion, guaranteed.
The safety of the airport, I think, is paramount, and a longer
Yeah,
runway.
we have to be willing to explain that. We have to be willing to explain that it's the width, not the length of the runway. It's the depth and the thickness of the runway. It's not how long it is. You know, there's been that misinformation spreading for the last 15 years. We just have to go with the truth and be willing to explain to people what it means. But we don't want to go with the shorter runway because then we lose some of the safety. It'd be such a sad
Oh.
scenario to not go with the 800.
Horribly sad. Cam, are you trying to get the screen up, or where are we? in
Yeah,
the process?
Ann was working on bringing that up, I think, those slides. I will say that one of the considerations is, oh, here we go. Can we turn it into a presentation? Let's see, we're showing the notes pages. Oh yeah, there we go. Yay. So this, can you can you click through this? This is the D3 design standards video. So as you can see, we'll leave it right there. As you can see, so the blue represents the current runway length relocated to the north. So you can see the existing runway kind of outlined in a little blue. You can see the runway 24 marker on it. And then under D3, it would be moved to the north and then extended to that 370 feet, which is the light green. An 800-foot extension goes out to the end of where that dark green is and the beginning of that red area, which is EMAS.
Kevin, you asked a question about TERPs and what was developed with that. I think there has been some work with that because we have a displaced threshold, and that displaced threshold addressed some of the TERPs issues and also some of the noise issues about the airplanes on final, if I recall the things correctly.
One of the things, and Leanne can jump in here again too, is that the longer runway actually showed a reduction in noise. And that may seem counterintuitive, but the reality of it is that if an aircraft has more space to be able to accelerate and climb before it gets to the end of the airfield, it's higher up. And so when they were doing the analysis, they actually determined that the longer runway actually reduces noise when compared to a shorter runway.
That was shown through the tool, through the AEDT?
Leanne, do you want to?
Yes, it was the noise contour shift to the western edge scoots in towards the airport. The
Mhm.
eastern noise contour does not
Can,
go further east.
can we show the noise
Yeah,
contours?
I think
We
have
actually
that.
have that slide. It was a backup slide. And it's at the end of the slide deck.
Excuse me a
And you're
second.
right. I think someone talked about we are going to have a displaced threshold in order for that. Okay.
Just-
I was
This
just
is-
gonna
Chair, I-
mention that.
Step in here for a sec, folks. Folks, excuse me, I have a point of order. The meeting is scheduled from 7 to 9 p.m. That's the way it's posted on the agenda. If we're going to go past 9 p.m., you're more than welcome to. You just need to vote to extend to go past 9 p.m. So I'm showing 8:48 on the clock right now. As committee members, you can go as long as you want. I'm just telling you, you need to vote before 9 o'clock to extend past 9 o'clock to, give yourself some extra time. Thank you.
I move that we extend the meeting to 9:15.
I second that. Those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed?
Aye.
I got one opposed vote. Is that correct?
I don't hear opposed. I think it was unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you, folks.
Okay, thank you on the point of order. We're going to 9:15. Here is the noise profiles of the airport. You want to, Cam, who's talking us through this?
I'll do that, Cliff.
Yeah, Leanne's the expert here. I'll turn it over to the expert.
Okay.
So just quickly, the blue outline is the 65 CNEL, which is the threshold for significance that the FAA uses. So that's from the previous master plan. Now, the 2018 from the AEDT model is in the yellow. So it does shift, and it squishes in a bit, except for a couple of those shoulders there. But primarily we have a couple things going on. We have many less operations at the airport than we did in the previous master plan forecast. We have a newer fleet mix. We have a different fleet mix. And this assumes the extension of the runway, which also shifts for the reason that Cam just stated, that those aircraft can get up in the air faster to the western areas.
So what was this based on, 370 or 800?
This is based on 800.
800, and this was the 2018 using the AEDT version, whatever it might have been in 20.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Jim?
going back to the question about the TERPs, I recall that the touchdown point essentially remains the same, and the extension is extended departure area. However, to make the on the ILS, to make the touchdown point further east would require raising the glide slope angle or offsetting it in some way and not align down the runway, because it meets the minimum clearance requirement right now at that touchdown point. It's more critical fuel and load wise on departure because the aircraft is heavier. The runway length should be in more, and it's less critical on arrival because the aircraft is a low fuel load and less weight and balance problem on landing, so you can still deal with the current touchdown point, and that's the way I remember it.
Okay, so I just want to thank you, Jim. This is what I was trying to get to, is that the touchdown point is the same. There's going to be a displaced threshold with any extension. that extension is not used it for arrivals. We're going to use that for departures if we need to, like that, right?
Correct.
That's the way I remember it.
Okay, that changes a lot of mindset. That should change a lot of mindset. That should alleviate a lot of concern. So for those, if anybody doesn't have an aviation background, a displaced threshold means you can't land at the end of the pavement. You got to go to where it's marked to land. It's not going to be any different right now. So for a landing aircraft, it's the same distance. Just so everybody understands.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're
and
talking
thank
on
you
the
for
T-
that explanation. I'm the guy that probably wouldn't understand that the most, so thank you, Kevin. I guess and maybe you can help me understand this a little bit more. From a takeoff perspective, you're taking off now from farther back, and now I'm assuming those planes, especially the planes in the pattern, that pattern would then shift a little bit too, because they're going up and they turn left or right as quickly as they can as Cliff suggested. They're paying by the hour. They want to get their landings in, their takeoffs and their landings in as quickly as they can. So would that change that pattern a little bit if they're taking off 800 feet prior? Maybe de minimis, but to some extent, or am I overthinking that, Kevin, in your experience?
Yeah, in my experience, they've still got to go to the upwind. They're not going to turn midfield because they're going to be overflying other parked aircraft, other people, other buildings.
Yeah.
They're going to go to they're still going to go to the departure end and over the golf course to that they maintain that. I mean, I'll defer to the pilots in the group, but that's as an air traffic controller, that's what I would expect, and that's what I've seen.
And this makes sense to me as a pilot, and which means it probably won't make sense to any of you. You could put napalm consistently, accurately between the goalposts. You just couldn't say at which end of the field. And that's because when you're coming in that fast or hot, it's hard to control exactly where it is. Same type of thing. An 800-foot displacement would probably not lead to an earlier turn, because 800 feet in terms of moving, they're 2 miles before they make the turn. 800 feet is not noticed. Cliff, am I close?
Yeah, I would suggest that the landing pattern would be the same as it is currently. There's no reason for small planes to land earlier than where the existing threshold is.
Any further or additional discussion wanted on?
Thank you for taking the time to explain it. It's appreciated.
Happy to, Lynn. Any further additional discussion? Okay, we have a motion. Was that able to be edited or?
I believe so. Laura, Elena, can you put that new improved motion on there? And I want to make sure we've captured the committee members' comments accurately. Would you like me to read it, Mr. Chair? You
Yes,
got it.
please.
Okay, the PAC recommends the San Diego County Board of Supervisors approves the airport master plan incorporating the D3 safety design standards with an 800-foot extension and associated program environmental impact report. Additionally, explore options with a keen focus on safety, sustainability, and noise. Does that accurately reflect?
I believe it does.
And maybe a silly question here, Mr. Chairman, but does it need to be updated program environmental impact report? I think that was one of the key points in the lawsuit.
No, it's fine. Since they actually removed the approval, this is a new approval of and it's all combined all together. So just the program environmental impact report is fine.
Okay.
I think you need the word runway in front of extension. Just saying.
There you go, thinking again.
Cliff,
Sorry, I muted myself. Laura, Lynn, are you able to do that on the fly, or should I send it to you again?
I want to risk confusing those board members, you know.
that's true. Cliff, is that consistent with what your motion? You're on mute, Cliff.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay. I don't believe we had a second to that. Does somebody wish to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Abby.
Okay, we've added runway, so that captures everyone's comments.
If there's no further comments, I'm gonna have a vote. Those in favor say aye, or you know what? Let's have a
Aye.
show of hands. Those in favor?
Aye.
I see all the hands. Where's Win? Yes, Win's hands up too. Fantastic. So, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That's really good. Any further comments or thoughts?
I make a motion that we end the meeting.
I think
I
that's what
second
I'm
that.
looking for. Do I have a second to that?
I second it.
9 o'clock.
Kevin, thank you. And those in favor say aye.
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 And I want to say thank you guys very much for showing up. I think we did a good job. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Great discussion.
So long. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.